everyone, my name is Anna and welcome to this video. I am actually a conductor, but today I'm gonna be talking about recitativos. And that's an example of a recitativo. So today I want to dive into one of my favorite recitativos from one of my favorite operas, Nozze di Figaro. And I want to show you how every single note, every single dynamic, everything is there to show you exactly what the count is thinking in real time. So I'm gonna first tell you about what a recitativo is, the types of recitativos. If you already know this, you can skip it. I'm gonna timestamp everything. Then I want to go bar by bar into vinta, la causa. And then in the end, I want to kind of talk about the challenges that these types of recitativos present to conductors. So let's get to it. What is a recitativo? What's the deal with it? Recitativo means recited, to recite, and that means that it is something that is way closer to the way we talk, to a conversation, to speech, than to a song. It still has written notes, but it follows the accentuation and the flow of a normal sentence in whichever language is written. And most importantly, in the opera, it's put there to give a lot of information about what is happening. It's usually a very quick-paced conversation, or even if it's just one character, it is giving us a lot of plot points about what is happening in the story. Now, in Mozart's time, we have two types of recitativos. The ones called secco, which means sort of dry, and the ones that called accompagnato, which is accompanied. Secco recitativos were accompanied by one or two instruments, mostly always a cembalo, because they are very fast-paced and they offer the singers a lot of freedom. Even though there are rhythms and notes written, you have the freedom to play with it ever so slightly, and that's why they're barely accompanied, so that the singers can, move around how they feel, they're in control, and the cembalo player, or the what's called a continuo, which is a cembalo plus a cello, they pretty much follow the text of the singers, and then they play the next chord when the singer arrives at that place. As an example, I'll put here a conversation between Susanna and Figaro at the beginning of the opera.
Io guardo se quel letto che ci destina il conte farà buona figura in questo loco.
Now, the other type of recitativo, accompagnato, involves the whole orchestra, and it is a little bit more set in stone as to what the singers have to sing, rhythmic-wise and note-wise. However, when it's written brilliantly, like Mozart's and many others, there is still little freedoms that the singer has, and that is where the conductor comes in, which I will show you all the way in the end. So, having said all of that, let's have a look at one of my favorite recitativos, which is vinta, la causa. And before we look, and because I want to go bar by bar and word by word, I have to fill you guys in on where the count is right now in the opera. Pretty much, the count is married to the countess, and they have two servants, Susanna and Figaro. They love each other, they want to get married. But because the count is not a great person really, he wants to reinstate an old rite called Prima Nocta, which I'm gonna let Jim Halper from The Office explain to you.
I am instituting Prima Nocta.
Prima Nocta is when the king got to deflower every new bride on her wedding night.
I'm sorry, I had a very different understanding as to what Prima Nocta meant.
So pretty much throughout the whole opera, we're gonna have Team Count, who's gonna be the people that want him to get his way with Susanna and want to separate Susanna and Figaro. And we're gonna have Team Figaro and Susanna, which is all the people that want to have them get married, the Count, stop trying to get his way with Susanna, and also justice for the Countess, who's constantly being cheated on. So the first line of this recitativo is, "We've won the cause." And this is something that the Count just heard Susanna and Figaro say about him, because they have a plan that they think is brilliant to get the Count and expose him in front of everyone and be able to get married themselves.
Ehi, Susanna, dove vai?
Senza avvocato, hai già vinta la causa.
Cosinato.
So the first thing we have is him repeating what he just heard. And there's nothing in the orchestra because he's digesting what that means. And then we get this very, very stern and sort of aggressive, assertive chords when he realizes that means he's probably being trapped or tricked into something by Susanna and Figaro.
Cosa sento?
And then he says, what trap did I just fall into? And as he says the word lacho, trap, we get this accompanying effect in the orchestra, which is a sforzato and then piano, which is a very quick accent that then backs off. And that is a perfect sound image of someone falling in a trap, and then you stop hearing them because they're down, they fell. And then we get this really big fermata, this stop. He's thinking, what does this mean for me? And then the orchestra tells us first what it means for him, because he could be sad, he could be reflective and say, actually, I was behaving a little bit, not great. But no, we get this presto, this quick music that is also very tempestuous and assertive. And then finally he says, I want to punish you so bad. And when he says punish you, we get this really forte, strong tremolos in the string, which, with this diminished chord, which communicate, punishment. And then he says the sentence will be what I want it to be. And after that we get this very sort of ominous chords. Now we get another big fermata, another big pause, because he's thinking about something else. And check out the music before we hear what he's thinking about. It's completely different to what's before. It's a new type of feeling and behavior he's having. He's considering a possibility. Because Figaro has this old contract with this other character that makes him have to marry this other character instead of Susanna, except that he pays her off this debt. And here Mozart writes something that makes the whole music sound suspicious, which is that Mozart writes in the oboe these notes that are extremely dissonant and clash with each other before he resolves it into something more harmonious. So just so you can hear better, I'll play in the piano. We start with this, and then we get this before it resolves. So that dissonance, that little details make the whole passage have an aura of like, oh my god, wait a second, what's happening here? But after this, he sort of snaps out of it, it goes back to the original tempo, and he says, pay her, no way, how? Implying Figaro does not have the money to pay her, that's never gonna happen. And a lot of singers interpret this in a sort of chuckly way, and that is probably supported by the figure with which Mozart accompanies these words. So he's pretty much going, pay her? How? Instead of going, pay her? How? If Mozart had written that, we would be like, oh, okay, he's actually concerned. But because of that figure, it's like, no, he's dismissive. After this, we get this other thought. He suddenly thinks about this other character who is Susanna's uncle and doesn't want to give her away in marriage because he doesn't like Figaro. And there's not much here because I think Mozart is allowing for the thought to take place, and it's also a thought that pleases the Count because it plays to his game, it plays to him getting away and getting Susanna. And I will reflect more about these two bars when I talk about conducting in the end. And after this comment about Antonio, we start wrapping up the recitativo and going into the aria. And these last few phrases, they all play with sort of extreme jumps. So we have this pleasant music that suddenly we get this very assertive chords. Or for example, here we get this very sort of quick sforzando that almost throw the whole phrase, off balance, to sort of show again what mental state he's in. His ego is bruised, he cannot control his temper, he's not thinking clearly. for a little word about conducting. So, like I said, recitativos secos, they are not conducted because it's only either just a cembalo or a cembalo and a cello, which is called a continuo. But when it's a recitativo accompagnato, that's our job. That's the conductor's job, to pay attention to how the singer is phrasing, the phrase, and cue the orchestra in at the right time where it has to coincide with the singer. So, one example. In that sentence where the count is talking about Antonio, we have a held note, and then the orchestra comes in and starts a new musical phrase when the count says matrimonio. When he says monio, the orchestra has to get going. But before that, there's just a held note. So that means for us conductors that we are holding that note and we're paying attention to how quickly, how strictly, slowly the singer is giving this phrase. And then we have to pay attention to a couple of syllables before the one where the orchestra already needs to get going. Because if the orchestra has to start when he says monio, and we can't just it's not a switch. You have to give the orchestra an upbeat so that they know, okay, here I start going. So for example, here I might pay attention to when he's saying matri, and then when he's saying those syllables, I give the upbeat, and then by the time the singer is at monio, we're all together. So I hope this was interesting. I had a lot of fun because I love this opera and I love this recitativo. I want to do a third video on Le Nozze about ensembles. It'd be interesting to see if you guys want to hear about that, because he writes the coolest, quartets, quintets, sextets. But in any case, I hope you liked it. I'll read you in the comments and I will see you next time.